Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who once again is doing a video on Billy Woods, one of my favorite people to talk about, and it seems as though you, my auditors, enjoy me when I talk about him as well. Now this isn't going to be a normal video. I'm going to be doing an interview. So I did this interview last month. The basic idea is that I believe that, Maps by Kenny Segal and Billy Woods is a masterpiece. It's just a beautiful album. It's basically perfect in terms of beats and rhymes. So I wanted a chance to sort of ask some questions and not just sort of have like an interview, but sort of like a long form conversation in which we could talk about its artistic merits, inspirations, etc. Sort of in view of like in the future when people go back and look at the work of Billy Woods, I think they will be happy to have this kind of long form interview. Now, there's long form and then there's the original version of this interview. So I've had this interview out unedited for about a month, and I've allowed Patreons to see it early. And listen, I'll put that in the comments, okay? So I'll put that in the description. You want to see the full 2.5 hour video, you really should, because it really emphasizes the vibe that we had here. What I'm going to be doing now is going to be, I have a table of contents down there in the descriptions. Billy Woods is very insistent, I think rightfully so, on his privacy, so he doesn't have his image at all during our video interview. So I just sort of put up images later on in this video. But if you want to see the super raw, uncut thing, go check out the longer version. It's not going to be as flashy as this, but it will contain all the information. So what I want to do now, now that I've announced the general idea of this project, is just tell you some of the things that I have cut out of this version. Okay? One, a very bad joke. I started the whole interview off with a joke, thinking it would land and get us to have some sort of camaraderie. Didn't work. It was a bad joke. If anything, I think it created a distance between us. And I tried to sort of backpedal. Interviewing is a very hard art, one which I am not, I hate to say, particularly talented. I work at it, but you'll see. You can tell me in the comments if you like it. Smash like bucket, all that stuff. I edited out a lot of pauses. It was hard to get this interview together. Kenny Segal lives in the West Coast. Billy Woods and I live on the East Coast. So, and they're touring and traveling, and they're very busy artists. It's the end of the semester, so I'm doing all these grading and oral interviews and all that stuff. So the time that we finally got together was like late at night, at least for Billy Woods and I. We're both family men. We've both been taking care of the kids all day. So that's sort of the reason for the kind of laid back, very sort of chill vibe from that you're going to hear in this interview. And that's going to hopefully be mitigated by my editing techniques. One thing I found in listening to the unedited version is I end up sounding like the guy from Vlad TV, where there's like pauses and the guy's just like, okay. Like the interview's like, and then I shot the guy 5 times in the face and I sold 50 kilos of cocaine and I broke parole. Okay. And then I recorded an album. Anyways, I was doing the Vlad TV thing, which hearing that is painful. I don't want to sound like that guy. Another thing you're missing is a lot of discussion of the album The W by Wu-Tang Clan. I thought that was going to be like a very rich vein to mine, and it was fairly interesting, but check out that. Discussion about The Alchemist and what makes an Alchemist beat, some discussion of MF Doom, some more talk about Aesop Rock, and then a whole bunch of Patreon exclusive questions. Speaking of Patreons, I've gotten like over 60 Patreons who wanted to see this video early, so if you're one of those people, I want you to know, stay tuned to the end of this video. I'm going to read all your names out. All my new Billy Woods Patreons and Kenny Segal Patreons. I appreciate you supporting what I do enough to give me some money to see that thing I did, Some other things you're going to be missing, a full pork belly recipe. If you want the proper pork belly recipe by Billy Woods, which I am going to make at some point in the next couple months, you have to watch the whole thing, the long version. I talk about one of the albums that I made and a whole bunch of other stuff. So enjoy the expurgated edition of the Billy Woods and Kenny Segal interview. Prepare to launch yourself into a world of reflection and art. And I hope you enjoy it. It's a stupid outro. Anyways, here's the interview. So whose idea was the album cover with the sort of emergency pamphlet for an airplane?
Oh, that was all Woods.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 covers, but
That was mine. I was flying the airline in question, much to my chagrin. And for whatever reason, I ended up looking at it.
Mhm.
I really thought that the colors and the style of the design just struck me in that moment. I just kind of had it and thought maybe we could do something with this. It was while I was still working on the album, but kind of knew what it was about.
I'm interested in is I was listening to a different interview with you, Woods, where you were talking to the Rap Music Plug podcast. It was a good interview. I suggest people listen to it. And you talked about working with Kenny, and you said that you had personal connections, but you didn't say what. And then you said no one can make Kenny style beats, but you didn't describe what you think a Kenny style beat is. A Kenny style
Really
beat.
putting him on the spot with me sitting here.
Yeah.
Part of my middle school and all of my high school years, very close to where Kenny grew up. Our parents don't live particularly far from each other right now. And we would have gone to the same high school if his, from what I understand, his family moved partially so that he wouldn't go to that high school.
Yeah, my parents tried to get me into the neighboring high school right before high school, but otherwise we would have been at the same high school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good move by them, man.
So, but how would you describe a Kenny style beat? Like if you say there isn't one, how would you describe this production?
I'm not a producer, and I have literally zero pretensions.
Good.
To such a position, but I can tell you there's a depth of texture to his beats that sometimes stands out. And then beyond that, I'd say the style, really, the style and how he decides to go about putting together a beat. In certain ways, yeah, it's tough, you know, because there are certain people who Alchemist's style of beat making, his current style of beat making is something that you can pinpoint what he's doing, but that doesn't mean you can do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes the simplest things can be the hardest to reproduce, you know?
Yeah, and I like too in that interview, you mentioned something which I just want to applaud Kenny for just not being drum less. The term I used was drum full. I feel like there's a lot of drums, and sometimes I swear there's even like actual polyrhythm on some of his beats, and it's very subtle, and that's one of the great things.
There's definitely a lot of the producers that I admire the most, that I love and take inspiration from. Ultimately, there is somewhat of a formula, even if it's not a formula that anyone else can do the same way they do. I can describe what their beats are all about. And I think that for me, I'm more like, I look at it more as like a audio collage kind of. Like a lot of people, like they get some kicks and snares and they program them and then add a bass line and then add a sample that get like, my beats normally start with a sound that I think sounds cool, and maybe a second sound that I think I can layer over top of it, that something interesting is happening with two of them. And then it's like, let's find one more sound that maybe solidifies that marriage in some way. And that can turn out to be like something ambient. It could be jazzy, it could be aggressive, it could be dark or light, like it could be anything. Like, but it's really about like just layering interesting sounds, I think. And that isn't so easy to like put into a box of like, I want to make a beat like that, because it's all happy accidents. It's all like being open and using your ears to like when something cool happens. And to what you said about polyrhythms, often there's drums. This is why it's hard to mix my beats too. I always want to mix my own beats, because like there's often like some drums that are in the sample I'm using, and maybe some other drums in a second sample that are not in any way on beat. And then I have like some additional snare or kick drum I lay over top of all of it to kind of bring it together in some way and make it make sense. But there's still all those like offbeat little hits that are hopefully offbeat in a cool way. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound whack, but like that definitely has a lot of that waiting around. That one has like this weird triplet rhythm going on in one of the samples that's totally nonsensical to the drums, but it sounds really cool. And somehow like the way Aesop Rock rides the beat makes it sound even cooler than it does when it's just by itself.
It's hard to place in terms of, oh, is this East or West Coast? What is the style? It's also very hard to say where it's, you know, if you're like, what are the stylistic roots for this? It's not really falling into the like early 2000s Def drugs vibe. It's not coming from the Mad Lib side of things. It's not like a lot of West Coast production that you've heard. Or
Though I would say that all of the things you just mentioned are huge influences on my sound. I just don't wear my influences on my sleeve, I guess.
and then I think another part of it is your process and your sensibilities are a bit odd. Where you're going and the things you put together are a bit strange without being, you don't really make weird beats. And I say this as a person who loves weird beats. I won't come to you to make a really weird album.
Totally.
Probably
Totally.
could if we discussed it, but the things you're making are sonically pleasing to the average human being. Third part of it, the fourth element that I think makes it complex and difficult to pin down is also your use of live instruments.
That was going to be a question later about, I mean, some of these songs, I can't piece it together because I can sort of piece together a sample and something that sounds like a sample, and then something that sounds like a real instrument. And then I think I hear it loop and it gets all
Well, that means
confusing.
I did my job well then.
So that's your goal, is to always hide that and make you just not know?
I mean, I don't want to act like I don't sit down, I'm like, that's my goal. But
Right.
yes, that is definitely part of like when a painter is making a painting, you ask like, how do you know when it's finished? Like part of the sensibility of I'm like, oh, we got it all the way there is like when it's not so obvious what the parts of it like. I love having a beat that there's only 4 elements, but you would be hard pressed to tell me what the 4 elements that are in that beat are.
The idea that I had was about the weirdness of this album and of your production and of these things together. So I know an album's good when my favorite song changes each day. So forever it was Year Zero, and then it was, but now it's Hangman. That's never going to change. It's always going to be my favorite song ever. Like, what is that sound in the chorus? What is that farting, like crazy low horn? Like, did you
Hangman?
record that? Yeah.
No, that
So
that is a sample.
Okay.
And I was actually surprised. I've seen some people talk online calling it a trombone. It is a trombone.
Okay.
Pitched down a lot. I mean, there's multiple things happening, but I believe the foghorn type sound that you're talking about is a trombone that's like way pitched down.
Because I mean, that is totally weird. And the first time I listened to it, I didn't really think about it that much. It's this great vibe, and it just goes so well with Woods's words and the sort of dark, semi-political, getting put up against the wall, basically kind of lyrics, and just
the whole song just has this claustrophobic feel.
Yeah.
Even the way the vocals are recorded.
This is great. I have a whole series of questions over here, and I'm just jumping all over the place. That's a sign that the interview is interesting. You don't follow along. I guess the more sort of general question, and you probably got this a couple times, but do you consider the albums to be connected? Do you consider Hiding Places and Maps to be a thing? I mean,
they're different, but obviously people before it even came out, somebody pointed out how just in the titles there are echoes and inferences that you could make. And
right.
So both albums were written from very real places in my life at particular times. Given that's the case, I'm sure there are more echoes waiting for me even to discover them. But no, and beyond that, and a line here or there that may reference something I don't see them as being particularly connected at all.
Yeah, that was the sense that I got. And I do wonder, and part of why I was even skeptical to ask you to do an interview is it's hard not to try to, because you write so well and in sort of an elliptical way where things connect and don't quite connect. The tendency is always to try to like get to the answer and say, oh, he's talking about this then because he said this then. And that's why these things work together. That's why they work. So I definitely pick up on that. And I think it's fun because I don't think you're trying to play with your audience. I don't get the sense, at least, that you don't say something and go, ooh, they're going to connect it over here. Right. But it is sort of an inevitable thing where people are just going to come up to you and say, did you mean this? And did you mean that? So I'll keep going.
Sometimes I did. So
Yeah.
It's not problematic to me.
Now, probably my most obnoxious question. This is definitely my most obnoxious question. In my review, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but I'm fascinated, especially as a person who teaches literature about the difference between romanticism and realism, right? And so, romanticism's people live like they're living in a novel and everything's very fake, and realism is often, based in real life and not a nobility, sort of lower class, middle class values and life. And I see this album, and I totally get that I might be totally off, but it feels to me like we're living in a moment, and that Call Me If You Get Lost and this album are perfect mirrors of each other, of a romantic view of what it is to be a rap star living the world and traveling and living on yachts and having matching luggage. And then Maps is like the realist version, where you're stuck on an EasyJet in Amsterdam and you have to wait for 5 hours in the back of an Uber. Do you hate me for saying that? Do you sort of see
Well,
it?
here's the thing, and
Yes.
I have friends who are big fans of Tyler, and I really respect his music. And DJ Ram gave me like a 30-minute breakdown of how important he is. But I don't really listen to his music
All right.
while recognizing super talented person, and I'll totally do something with them. It's just not something that, and not enough people around me play it casually that I really. So short end of the story is I have not heard that album.
Awesome. That's
And-
even
And
better.
me neither.
Really?
Although I do like Tyler's music, and some of his earlier albums I'm more familiar with. I not only had never listened to that album, wasn't even aware of its existence until people started bringing it up after we.
That is crazy. I mean, I knew it
I mean,
existed.
well, I like heard. I mean, I guess that's too strong. I knew it existed. I just didn't know it was about like I didn't know anything about it or that it had. Yeah, I just somehow.
Okay. Yeah, I'm there with you. I knew the title of it, and I
Yeah.
knew people thought it was great.
It's part of it is like last year I spent my whole year when I'm working on albums, I'm not always trying to like hear what's new. And I was working on like a whole bunch of different albums last year. So like my head was in the sand almost the entire year.
Yeah, and I think Woods was making a couple albums as well, so
Yeah.
that makes sense. Well, maybe someday when you're tired of people bringing it up to you, you can listen to it and sort of hear what people have been hearing. I think it totally makes sense that it's not intentional and it's more just kind of a zeitgeisty, coincidence, whatever, right? And it's a very edifying comparison to make when you listen to the albums both very closely. Although, truthfully, I prefer Maps. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. I do prefer Maps, but I do like the other one quite a bit. Well, I knew that question would be a little bit obnoxious. So then what I've done now is I've culled some questions from my Patreon. Favorite album you've made?
That's like, what's your favorite kid?
Yeah. We'll
Yeah,
just say
that's a tough
Maps, right? Let's just say Maps.
Yes, sure.
Yes.
You're allowed to say another one.
No, I mean, that's the thing.
Right. It's like if your
they're all-
newest thing isn't your favorite thing, at least when it first came out, then should you have even put it out?
I think I am a better rapper now than I ever have been before. Although that is not the only thing that makes a record, right? But and I feel like so if somebody asked me what's your best work, I probably would say Maps. I feel like I'm at the height of my ability. I feel like the production was really good and it came out exactly how I wanted. But favorite album, can't do that.
I will say there's another really good YouTube channel, Dead End Hip Hop, and they were talking about you, Woods, and they were saying that the reason that you're like Lupe Fiasco is that you're both only getting better. And there's so few rappers, even the greats, like plateau, but very few get better and better and better. So I think that was an interesting comparison that they made. And I'd agree that it's just like, it's very exciting because every time you release something, it's like, well, he keeps getting better. So I don't know what's going to happen. Eventually he's going to have to explode or something, but
eventually I will fail, but I feel like but favorite album that's too hard. I mean, like I said, I was just listening to Church today for the first time in a while, and I was like, these are fucking great songs. Messiah is a great producer. There's and records are doing different things,
And what defines best? Because I would say like Aethiopes and Hiding Places are albums that are so amazing, but they're not albums that I like would listen to a whole lot of times, like in my leisure. They kind of are such an experience. While like Church is like of your recent albums, like the one that I listen to in my leisure time the most, probably. Like
It's sort of like the
it,
To
and
Pimp a
you're like,
Butterfly and Damn paradox, right?
right, exactly. Like Damn, yeah, for Kendrick Lamar. Yes, I've listened to that album more times than To Pimp a Butterfly, even though right, it's like what does best mean? Like that's a loaded question.
All right, then
All
let's
right.
just see if we can answer this question with yes or no. Do you get enough respect, Kenny?
Oh, I get way more respect than I deserve, in my opinion.
Okay,
I don't know.
Woods, do you get enough respect?
nah, I mean, as a person who was doing this when nobody, sure.
Okay, sure. um,
It's tough to gauge because when you're coming from a place of really like fighting for anyone to care to actually getting some significant light shown on your work, then your first instinct, of course, I mean, I'm super appreciative of it all. But there's people who like started off their careers with the type of attention that I get now. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And like it just you realize that there's like many degrees more um to it. But yeah, it would seem churlish to complain about attention right now.
The comments I get most often are, thank you so much for talking about Woods's work. I wish more people were talking this seriously about Woods's work, just constantly. Like, I mean, I think my videos about you are good, but there's a thirst for people to really really give you this appreciation and take your work even more seriously than I do and give it even more attention. And I do think it's true that I don't think you get enough respect sort of in the general way, but the kind of respect you get from your fans that I see like reflected, off the sun reflecting off the moon of my videos is pretty wild. I don't think there's any rapper that's more respected than you by the people who like you. So for whatever that's worth.
All right, I'll take that.
The thing I think is interesting, Woods, is that you're famous for being private, but like Maps is like the most personal rap album I think I've ever heard. Like,
How do people say that every time though? Because people said that about Church.
I don't think it's true about Church. Church was very personal, but
People
this
say
one,
that
you know what it
all
is?
the
I think
time.
it's that I relate to. I was in a long distance relationship that made traveling in Europe very difficult. So maybe I just happen to relate to some of the things you were talking about. But
Sure.
do you like feel exposed when you release this? Like, is that
I
part
feel
of?
like you make the music in a different from a different space, when you're making art. Occasionally there are things where you're like, oh, I'm not gonna and the funny thing is sometimes the things that you really are like, oh man, should I really like write this or put this out, end up being like nobody notices, Not in the way that you feared or whatever. Or if somebody ever is like, is this me in your song? It usually is like the wrong song.
I did sing about you, but not here.
It's crazy. It'll be like, what? Why would you pick that one? Um, but yeah, I guess when I'm making it, I don't think like that.
Like I would say this album is more relatable, but yeah, I kind of agree. I didn't when we were making it, I
Okay.
didn't think of it.
Also, it's necessary for me to understand there's things that I don't see because I am doing it.
Right.
And maybe I'll see them clearer, especially so close, like it just came out. I wrote all this stuff in the last year. It might be that later I will look at it in a different light.
I think Kenny might be right that there's something about it that might just be more relatable. Maybe it's because it feels to me that because so many of the things touch on touring in Europe. And it's like, I just happened to know that you were touring in Europe because I was hoping that you'd play somewhere in Western New York, and no one ever plays in Western New York. So, I saw your tour dates. And so like, you can sort of connect the dots and everything sort of makes sense with what you said previously. Whereas with Church, that felt to me very personal, but only in the way that it felt like it was reminiscing. It felt, and same thing, with Hiding Places, the whole, I mean, just I seriously, that whole verse about pretending to play in an arcade, you know, without having the two quarters, like, I mean, that's obviously, you can't get more personal than that. That's an amazing vignette of what you went through. But that still feels kind of
shout out to the
far
Aspen
away.
Hill movie theater. You ever
Aspen,
go?
wait, Aspen Hill, is that what you said?
Yeah, Aspen Hill, Maryland movie theater. That
That's
later became a
talk about
dollar.
personal connections. There you
Later
go.
on, it became a dollar movie theater, but in the beginning, it wasn't. Man, they had golden. I think they had Golden Axe in the lobby.
Okay.
They
Yep.
had a few games in the lobby, and then also there was a 7-Eleven by the first place we moved. We had an apartment on Georgia Avenue, like Georgia Avenue and maybe like Connecticut. There's a gas station there, and then next to it is 7-Eleven, and then a little hill, and then these apartments. And I used to come down from the apartments and like just kind of hang around the video games in the 7-Eleven. And eventually they took them out because it was like, don't need the problems, you know?
Right. Wow, that's awesome. So we now can at least have some kind of location to go.
An actual movie theater in Aspen Hill.
And you went there too, Kenny?
I have been there before. I did not go there to play video games on the regular Woods, but I have been there before.
So let's get into the album a little bit. With KENWOOD Speakers.
I thought I had the best sounding stereo in the dorm, till my neighbor got a Kenwood high-speed receiver.
Before you choose anything else, make sure you hear a Kenwood high-speed receiver first.
I hope it'll sound as good as a Kenwood.
Only Kenwood has high-speed circuitry. High speed reacts fast to every musical note, so you get clear, accurate sound.
I think I should have got a Kenwood. Next time,
don't settle for anything less.
Like, they're not good speakers, right? I mean, that's part of the idea. And then the whole beat sounds so like super blown out and awesome. Is there some degree to which it's supposed to sound like a blown out KENWOOD speaker, or is that just like, is that like a form function intentionality, or am I just reading into it again?
I mean, the beat's supposed to sound like,
happened in such a strange, of all the stories of all the songs, that might be one of the strangest ones.
Okay.
And how it actually ended up getting made.
the term Kenwood, though, although obviously is a speaker brand, when we were goofing around, when I was sending beats to Woods over the course of this album, a lot of times I was calling the iTunes playlists Kenwood Bleagle just because it sounded funny.
Right.
So it also, I think,
it's like, yeah, oh, Kenwood's an actual. I obviously remembered because I am of a certain age. I'm like, that's an actual speaker company. Oh, it would be funny to like name the album that, but then you're like, we can't actually do that. Nah. You know, but it's entertaining for a moment, you know, to do the Mad Villain thing.
Right. Or the I did the entire review of the Alfredo album and didn't realize it was Alchemist and Freddie Gibbs.
Yeah.
Everyone said in the comments, it's very good for YouTube videos to make stupid mistakes, because then everyone comments and tells you you made a stupid mistake. But I never even did that.
Engagement off that.
Yeah.
But they also didn't. The name of it wasn't Alfredo puts out an album, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Eddie Sauce the album. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It was still like the title. And we definitely weren't going to be like Billy Woods and Kenny Segal, Kenwood. That's not, that doesn't even sound cool. Like Alfredo.
No.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think I should have got a Kenwood.
I had that in my mind, but I don't know. The process by which that song came to be was so strange. I would have to say no, but maybe if it had sounded different, it wouldn't have gotten named that.
Right. What made it so strange?
We were pretty deep into the album, and Kenny and I might have to go back and forth on this a little bit.
Oh, good.
From my end, we were pretty deep into the album, and I was there. This would be when I'm on my way to Japan.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
I think I was on my way to Japan. I came to LA for a couple of days to really try and what ended up being one of the last sessions. So I'm at Kenny's and we're working on the album, like trying to finish it. And at that point, I came through with some things I already had written to beats that he had sent me. And we already had a bunch of the record recorded. And so I came through, recorded some things, and then it was just like, play me something else. Let me write. And at that point, I guess how I like to describe it is going downhill is how I describe it. At a certain point, I'm so dialed in on where the space that this album and everything we're doing is taking place in. I actually can't really think about anything else in my regular day-to-day life. I can't work on other projects, or if I owe you a guest verse, and I'm not going to be able to send it, because it's just like everything is taking place in this world for me. And so at this point I'm at Kenny's. And
Yeah, so that beat has an interesting lineage. It's a little different than most other beats. The reason it sounds all blown out, I think in the beginning of 2022, there was supposed to be like this show in LA that was going to be with Ruby Yacht, where this venue was going to give us like a whole 3-day period to like set up in this venue, but it all got shut down. Maybe it's 2021 when it all got shut down because of COVID. It must have been 2021. Okay. It was like one of the last COVID surges, and they shut the whole thing down before it happened. So I ended up for that week, like Rory Rat Ferreira was in town, and actually Sam Herring was in town, and my homie Mickey, who's a drummer, was in town. And we ended up going to that venue, even though we couldn't have the show we were supposed to have. We just jammed for like literally like 3 days straight. And I brought all my like drum machines and samplers. And in the aftermath of that, when everyone went home, I was just so jazzed up. I set up the exact same setup that I had for that jam session in my studio on the floor. And it included, I just bought like Behringer made like a remake of the 808 drum machine, but it's like a real analog 808. So I had that, and I had this little kid's toy that I've been using with this in the shows called the Ucreate, and I had the drum machine hooked in through the Ucreate. That's why it sounds so blown out, because it's like a 8-bit kid's toy that everything's running through. And then I had my OP1 is where the sample was coming from. But basically, I spent like a week after that jam session at my crib recording myself just doing these long live jam beats, where each one would be like 8 or 10 minutes long, because I'm like doing it all live and kind of in the moment. And I have this body of work from that's just been sitting around, and that's what that beat is from. Basically, that is like I chopped up like a minute and a half, the best minute and a half out of this like 7-minute song, and that's what that beat is, and that's why it sounds all weird and different. And yeah, that was at that moment where I was like out of the new beats, and I was either making beats or just going on my hard drive through some old ones to play. And Woods was on a roll, like literally writing like 2 songs a day at that point. And I threw that beat out there, and he was like, dang, it's dope. And like, I edited it down a little bit, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's wild. So it's just that chunk was taken from that whole session. That's where Woods, you're going to be driving people crazy, because if you're trying to say this is not a part 2 and you're trying to say it's not connected, then when I listen and I hear SpongeBob, the first track off Hiding Places, came back to God like motherfucker you promised, and then on this we have God's a hater. It's like we have basically the 2 most clear theological statements about the duplicitousness of our creator, and they're in the same location on different albums, but it's all just coincidence.
Because I feel like they're expressing 2 different things.
Okay.
One of them, the first one, when I was really writing about it, I guess to some extent I thought about what it must be like to be like, let's say you were in Al Qaeda or whatever, and you're there, and you really believe that God promised you victory,
Right.
Instead you're gonna lose,
Right.
What did the second one is being a person who's either through PTSD of personal experience or just superstition or whatever, you always feel like something bad is waiting around the corner.
Right. So in the end, comparing them is pretty superficial. So
well, no, I mean, it is interesting that they both stand there, but to me they're different. In both of them, the deity doesn't speak. It's just people wrestling with their own thoughts and demons and expectations, you know.
And then
Sir.
with the final verse, I really felt that's a very cinematic moment where you're describing this dinner party, and just to me, it felt like it was a Jordan Peele movie. It's a very powerful ending that I almost don't want you to explain, but is very intriguing. So do you want to explain, or do you want to keep it a mystery?
No, I don't mind talking about any of that. I think
Okay.
you could definitely make a quote unquote Jordan Peele type beat about that scenario, you know. Yeah,
Because what are you whispering, right? I mean, that's the thing, are you
that's the thing. I think yeah, I think when I was a kid I liked a lot of weird I like weird short stories, like Stephen King. I like weird. I read this woman's book, things we lost in the fire, strange little short stories. And I think after the first verse I wanted to go somewhere, and that's where it went. Like I felt like the first verse was dope, and then it was like there wasn't really anywhere interesting to go in that direction after that.
right?
Um,
So then just kind of
and
kind
that's
of
where that's just where it jumped for me, and very much thinking of a strange little sort of 70s horror film in miniature.
The most delicious water in the world is not bottled. The most delicious water in the world comes out of every New Yorker's faucet. A drop of New York City tap water begins its journey in the Catskill Mountains. Most of the city's water supply travels via the Delaware and Catskill aqueducts, massive underground tunnels that are buried up to 1,000 feet underground and stretch nearly 100 miles. Each drop is world-renowned for its quality. Testing begins at the source, and monitoring continues along the way, with scientists ensuring that the city provides safe and clean water for all New Yorkers. Once in New York City, water travels through the city's 6,800-mile-long water main system. Last stop, your apartment.
New York City tap water. I didn't write that. Kenny alluded to this earlier. I didn't finish the album till I got back from that tour. I went to California, then to Japan, then like 2 weeks in Europe, Dolo. And I knew that was the idea, but I didn't write it till I got home. And New York City tap water I wrote in the first maybe 48 hours of being home, because that's really what I wanted to capture, is that moment of getting home, like where you wake up the next morning and you're kind of surprised at being in your own house
right.
for the first 2 days or whatever.
In both those, I mean, putting FaceTime and New York City tap water together, I always tell my kids, the best things in life are bittersweet. Nothing good is totally bitter. Nothing, good is totally sweet. It's some kind of mixture of both. And it's great because you're able to really express, in New York City tap water, you're like, I don't really know why I missed being home so bad. And at the same time with FaceTime, I don't really know what's so great about traveling. That sort of that contradiction is really well expressed in those two songs.
Yeah, for sure. Right? You come back to a place like New York, part of you is like, man, I've been on the road for 3 weeks. I didn't see one rat. I
Right.
get back. You notice the rats show up in only the first song and that song.
Huh.
Because it's like as soon as you get back, you're home for an hour, you see a fucking rat. You're like, why do I like this place again? I tried to bring all of those things to bear, and I think writing that in the moment was really, really, really important. All I had was the first line. I knew the first line. I knew the New York City tap water was the title, and I knew that part of the beginning.
Oh man, as a Bostonian, I just laughed at that because we're so sick of hearing about New York City tap water. I have so many friends from New York. Like, it's so good. I know it's good. I know the bagels are better. I know New York City is a better place. There's no Bostonian who's serious, who actually thinks that Boston's a better place than New York. We're all joking, but shut up about the tap water. It's so funny.
Excuse me. How far is to Mount Baker? Mount Baker. As the crow flies, about 12 miles. Really? What if I'm an East Asian chinchilla monkey running as fast as I can? How far is it then? Or how far is it as the beaver swims? Let's say I'm a beaver swimming upstream with my family, and one of my beaver kids snaps a flipper.
That and as the crow flies, where Elucid really just did the heavy lifting there.
Yeah, let's not exaggerate. So I mean,
it is because, and I think sometimes people don't understand. Like in that song, I was like, okay, he wrote his part first. I wanted to capture more. I wanted to get an epilogue after those 2 days home, because there's your actual life that you start living after that,
Yeah, I guess so. He's talking about cleaning the kitchen. So you're right. Like, he is sort of
But
doing the heavy
also
lifting in that way.
He kind of addresses touring and home as a set of routines, because he also talks about baggage on the carousel loop, splitting ribs in Kansas City, like other things, at the same time that he talks about doing his familial duties and all of these other things.
Right.
So it's a series of loops that are happening within his verse that really set the stage for me. And to say that isn't to take credit away from myself. I love the end piece. I felt really strong about it when I wrote it, but you need the rest of it. And it's not like you can just turn to anyone and say, hey, here's this song, and they deliver in that way and beyond your expectations, without being too on the nose. Or, I didn't need a verse about, here's what it's like a week after I've been home from tour. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's people like that who allow you to be able to do 8 bars or 6 bars or whatever it is, and have them carry that sort of impact.
Yeah, man, that was because when I think about this album on the whole, I mean, we've talked about a little bit how KENWOOD Speakers, it feels intentional. It's a little bit jarring. It's not quite in keeping with the rest of the album, sort of sonically and even lyrically. Like, it's a little bit apart from the rest of it. And then you sort of get Easy Landing, so you get the sense that you're leaving, and then New York City Tap Water is obviously coming back. And I really like the As the Crow Flies tagging it at the end, because New York City Tap Water, that's the end of the album. That's totally supposed to be, the album is supposed to be, if you had some A&R that you were listening to, it starts with Easy Landing, because you take off and then you land in New York City Tap Water and it's all over. But at least the theory that I got, and obviously my theories have proven to be completely useless, but interesting all the same. What I felt was that, when you're a good author and a good artist, as you are, you don't want to have a conclusion that just sort of ends it. You want to, open up a window as you close a door. So what I got from this was that in a couple of years, or at some point in the next couple of years, that whatever that last verse is, the meditations on death and on children, and just how bizarre it is that there are human beings on earth that when they say the word father, they're going to see your face. I've been a father for 17 years. I still can't get over that idea. And it seems to me that's a lot of what you're talking about, and just the cruelty of children, which I love that you bring up, and just this whole sort of like domestic parenthood thing. It feels like we didn't just land, but you sort of are already like shooting off into this other direction. Was that the idea?
No, honestly, and that could still prove to be true.
Right.
My intentions were fully focused on doing the service to this album, and so in my mind, I really just, and that's what I was saying, is that having the stage set for me to be able to sit there and be like, what can I do here? Which I think sometimes people don't understand. Or like, if somebody comes up to me and is like, oh, Stone Fruit, what a great song, what a great verse. I think it's one of my best verses of all time. But all of it is created by the space It was made for me by Elucid to just be able to do that. He did the whole song, he picked the beat, and he did that chorus, and he just leaves it to me to do something that is well within my capability, which is like set a scene and bring it full circle in a verse with like emotional weight and clarity. I can do that, you know?
Right.
It's like if you get Shaq the ball under the basket, he's going to bring the rim down on people. So sometimes people don't understand how some of our best moments are set up by our collaborators. You know what I mean? And you put people in a position to succeed. And a lot of times when I collaborate with him, I can ask him to do something and he puts me in the best position to be able to do it. There's nobody else that I could have been like trusted to be like, all right, you're going to be the primary voice on the last song of an album like this. So personal.
Right.
Perfect for me to just come in and say a few things, you know, and the stage is like perfectly set. Like family has already been brought into the picture through his verse.
Right.
Sense of domesticity has already come into the picture through his verse. And so then I can just sit back, play off of that, and do something that I thought was really special. And other people did too. All the dads, all the rap dads hit me up about that one.
I bet.
Dads in general, in the dads in general, I feel like that was a strong one.
Wow. Well, speaking of collaborators, Kenny, I've been just like, I've had to jump over a whole bunch of questions I've had for you because we've been going on this little riff here. So I'm going to try to catch up. So on FaceTime.
Back everyone, I wanted to go ahead and break down some of my favorite FaceTime tricks and tips that you can utilize now in 2022.
3.
What is the saxophone? Was he singing to the saxophone or did you match the saxophone to what he was singing? Because
The saxophone came second.
Okay.
Sam wrote that amazing melody. And I mean, the funny thing is, I think Woods was skeptical when I told him I wanted to have my saxophone play. Like, he thought the song was perfect already, I think. And I was like,
so crazy, but of course I trusted him. So I'm like, whatever. But the song felt so crazy from the beginning. I was a little bit iffy. Anyway, you tell the story.
yeah, I just, to me, the melody, it was as simple as it kind of evoked like almost like a John Coltrane melody in my head, and I could just hear a saxophone playing that. So I had my friend Aaron Shaw, shout out Aaron Shaw from the band Black Nile, come over, and I had him originally there's a version of the song where he doubles the entire chorus. We felt like it was just a little too busy, so we have it the way it is, where it kind of just doubles like the final melody of it. And then I had him do a couple passes just blowing through the whole song, and that's where the little solo at the end came from. But yeah, that was just one of those, I felt like, yeah, that beat has like 3 elements. It has like a sample, it has like some drums, and then it has saxophone, and it just felt like it needed that one more thing to, or it actually has a bass sound in it, 4 elements, but it felt like incomplete to me. And then once the sax was added, I was like, now it's complete.
Yeah, I mean, I love that saxophone so much. Like to me, without the saxophone, the song wouldn't work. So I'm very happy. I mean, what do I know? I'm just a music critic, so I'm the worst kind of music critic. But yeah, that was just great. And then moving on to sound check.
The worst thing that a band can do getting to sound check is to waste time. When you do get to sound check, it is not time to socialize and talk amongst yourselves. It is time to get to work. There's a whole team of people that have worked for maybe hours before you, getting your stage ready. So when you get there, make sure you guys get there on time and get to work. Set up your instruments, turn them on, do your patch, and let's go.
Okay, let's do it. All right. Check 1. Simple.
Sort of on our loose progression that's jumping all around. I just, my son is actually like a really big Woods fan, and he's staying quiet upstairs. I think he's playing Legend of Zelda. And he just freaked out at soundcheck. He was like, because your record label allowed me to listen to it early, and he's like, where do I find this? I'm like, it's not out yet. It's like, wow, Dad, that's cool. I'm like, I know, but like, And the thing he couldn't believe is the beat, just like the bells on SOUNDCHECK. So like, what is happening? Is that like you just recorded a drum beat and then you have a different sample of bells? Are
Yeah,
you
this is
playing
like
the
another one
bells?
of these sound collage approaches, I think, to beat making that I have that's a little bit different than the average person. There's multiple layers of drums in that track, or samples that have drums in them. There's like the main drums, which is like a chopped up like break beat, and then there's like that sound that has the cymbals that you're talking. There's like two different layers of cymbals in there. There's a second layer of percussion that comes in and out that has some of the real jangly cymbals that happen, that also has some low drums in it as well that kind of play off the main drums that make it. That's what makes the whole groove really work. The drums by themselves feel a little disjointed, and then when you add that extra layer, it kind of makes the groove. But then also in the melodic samples that come in and out, there's additional cymbal work in there, and those are the more like pretty tinkly cymbals.
Right.
And kind of the combination of all three, you don't really know what's from what, and it all sounds like one. It's, yeah, I mean, to me that's a perfect example of like the synergy of each of those sounds. If I played them for you by themselves, like, aren't really that special, but when they all layer upon each other, it, like, little happy accidents happen. And early on in the process of working on the album, that was one of the, like, it wasn't the first song we did or anything, but it was in the like first like 5 or 7 songs or something. And early on, we had gone, one of the times when Woods was in town, we went over to Alchemist Studio and played him like the demos that we had so far. And when that one came on, he like turned to me, gave me a fist bump, and was like, "Kenny, this is the one."
Awesome.
He does make that very particular face.
Yeah, and it's not like he said that on any of the other songs either. Like, he was very much like, "Yo, this is the one."
Yeah, and he'll say it kind of quiet.
Yeah, right. He's not an emotional man. He's a stoic guy.
I mean, well, he says loud things in general when you're around him, but when he decides to be like, "This is the one" or "That's the joint," it's like half whispered.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Just for us to know.
All right. Well, I'll have to tell my son that he had great taste, because I'm a little bit, I think I was just more drawn in by the sort of flash of like Year Zero, and just like how just
what it is. Oh crap. Hey, what blank did you graduate?
Year.
All right. 7,421 minus 7,421 is
0.
There you go.
Year 0.
You got it, my friend.
Right.
Guys, before we get started, please give us a big.
I mean, that's a great example of just taking something so weird, but it's not actually that weird. I don't know. I
think you nailed it. That's a good example of what Woods was saying in the very beginning, that I really don't make beats that are weird in the realm of experimental beats, but they are weird in that they are kind of weird.
Yeah. But before we get off of SOUNDCHECK, so this is the main question that I've had for Woods since I've listened to this. So I mean, I personally like, I cannot get enough of this song. I see a lot of the different themes, or I see themes which may or may not be there intentionally, and definitely the frustration that it seems that you're expressing, and having to be sort of the weird dehumanization of fame, and quite often being in sort of spaces where you're sort of welcomed but dehumanized, and your insistence on not doing sound checks, I think is a very important thing. Like, I think it's a very important statement for you, saying, I'm not a diva, I'm a human being. Like, that's what I hear in this. And it reminds me of the famous Kanye line, like, you should be honored by my lateness. And even though it's whatever, there's a bunch of cheesy lines in that song, like, I've often thought about that. Like, he's not just being an asshole, he's also like trying to say that he's there. But the word Pyrrhic, so you pronounce it. So you pronounce it Pyrrhic.
It's just one of those words
that you pronounce that way. Okay.
Why didn't anyone tell me that I was wrong?
Well, this is the thing, though. So
no one told my mom.
One of my favorite things is never make fun of someone for mispronouncing something, because it means that they read it. So it's like there's a thousand words that I mispronounce because you only read them, you know? I mean, like you, because of your music, I've you know, I bought House of Hunger, but if you heard how I pronounce this person's name just from reading it, you'd be offended and you'd hang up because it'd be so off, you know? But it's like,
I mean, to be fair, that's probably like 31 letters.
yes, it is, but no, but seriously,
it's a long.
So I did read an interesting. I forget where I read it.
Greek, I suppose, but I really should have gotten that one. My bad, everybody.
But
No,
it works because you say every live show I forget the lyrics, so it actually
right.
works.
I read someone that wrote that on the internet that it was on purpose as a reference to forgetting the lyrics because it's the lyric from Rehearse to Ornette. But
hey man, all of these interpretations are welcome.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when I the funny thing is, as soon as I thinking about the guests on this album, with one exception, all of the guests who I was like, oh, I hear this for this person, ended up happening exactly like that. Like as soon as I heard, I know that as soon as I heard Soundcheck and was listening to it and writing it, I was like, all right, this is Quelle. Before I'd even finish. Kenny, am I wrong?
No, that right. You definitely, you were talking about
the type of shit he rhymes over like breakfast. You know, obviously he can rap over anything, but I was like, this is just, he can walk right through this beat, just tap dance on it and do his thing.
I think one thing that we really benefited from with all of the features is that everyone wrote from the heart so much. Like you can really tell each person was like feeling what those songs were about on a very visceral level. It wasn't just like, oh, I got to do this verse for Woods' album or some shit like that. It was like they were really like leaving a pound of flesh on the page there.
For the only one we didn't get that I knew would have been perfect was Earl on Rapper Weed.
True.
And it was just the wrong timing because he had his album coming out. He put his album out and then he was just in a different mode, which I can totally respect. And it just didn't happen. But that's why initially the second verse was so short.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I don't know exactly what he's going to do or where he's going to fit in. But and then we ended up being like, actually, this is perfect. I'm just leaving it like that.
On battlefields like this, weekends are won or lost. To win the war on grass and weeds, you need the ultimate weapon. You can do it, Norman. The new super lightweight, gas-powered weed eater trimmer.
Because with Rapper Weed, I was thinking how, like, you repeat the chorus, like, it seems like a lot. And is it just that you're proud of it? Because I like it seems really fun to say, like all the ack sounds. Was that like, or is that just to make up for the fact that you don't have the Earl verse?
I know that there was a point where he was encouraged, he was gonna write more for that song, and I was the one that was like, "Nah, dude, this song is perfect. The chorus, like having it a bunch of times, is so dope."
That was one of the first songs we did. So no, I just repeated the chorus because it felt good in my mouth, you know.
Right.
I recorded very little of this album in New York, which is where, you know, the vast majority, 92% of my material gets recorded.
Before I fully even knew what the album was gonna be about, you were already saying in the very beginning that you wanted to write and record most of it on the road.
Methodology is huge for me. I always switch up the methodology of doing stuff. So maybe have never recorded vocals sitting down before. And I recorded probably 40 or 50% of this album, 50% of this album.
That's right. I forgot because we talked about that in the beginning because I often discourage.
You had the mic already in a seated position when I was over there. And then I was like, well, fuck it. Let me just try it. You were going to go move it. And I was like, I never recorded sitting down. But again, you know, I like to switch up the methodology album to album, do different things, try different things. And so when I was at Kenny's in LA, every verse I spit in LA was recorded sitting down. I mean, a lot of times with methodology, it's come to things like that for me from like chance encounters or decisions. Like today I wrote Nothing is really just a result of seeing that guy, the drunk guy in the bar in Featherweight with the book, and he gave it to me and I was like, wait, I haven't been able to write anything. What if I just do this? Like I was looking at the book. And then it wasn't until he got up to leave and fell off his chair that I was like, oh, this guy was wasted the whole time. But that was still a cool book. I didn't know Carnes before then. And so I went back, I looked at the book and then I went upstairs, Googled, found was reading more stuff and was like, let me do this. Or like Known Unknowns. I was having some conversation with Aesop. He was like, man, he was just like, it would be so ill if you just rhymed on the beat proper. Basically, he was like, it would be so ill if you rhymed on beat. I'm like, I am on beat. But then I was like, all right, well, fuck that. Let me just make, because then I actually, on his beat on Bush League, I come in on like that halfway through the first measure or whatever. And he's like, who does that? And then I was like, all right, let me try to approach this, and and I made like an album where like every song has a chorus.
Now, speaking of chance, here's yet another Professor Sky coincidence that is totally meaningless. But on the fourth track of Hiding Places is the one where he referencing not wanting to see Nas play at Carnegie Hall, which I know isn't really about Nas. But then on this fourth track, this is where you talk about rappers bloated with gout, which can be seen as a reference to Nas and his King's disease thing. I don't think it is.
Oh, that is good. That is excellent. That is excellent work. I did not even see that, but
yes. So when you're saying rappers bloated with gout, is that about Nas?
No.
Okay.
But just sort of that was just a song brought about kind of by the circumstances. I was just in LA and it was like,
hey, Sky Editing here. So at this point, we went on this long conversation about Nas and Jay-Z. Check out the unedited version if you want to hear Billy Wood's opinion on that particular long-lasting debate. And then I start talking about pork bellies, and we go into a long discussion of pork bellies, which is going to segue into this discussion of blue smoke. So let's jump in later in the conversation with Kenny talking about blue smoke. Sorry, that's my baby in the background. As you can tell, maybe if you're paying attention, I'm editing with a baby in the background and a daughter playing Zelda.
By the time you get your food on, you want just this light blue smoke, which is called just clean smoke. It's what you want to kiss your food.
I'd also say that Julian Scallions and Other Alliums is maybe one of the coldest food bars of any food rap of all time.
The peppermill one grind.
I'd ask my wife what an allium is. I'm not much of a chef myself. I'm lucky enough to be married to him. I was like, what's an allium? What is that even talking about?
That was one of the few lines that did not go over my head. I knew exactly what he was talking about.
Well, speaking of eating, let's talk about one of the other things that's eaten a lot on this album. So in Bad Dreams.
I had a bad dream. Don't be afraid. Bad dreams are only dreams.
They're only dreams. It's the introduction on the album of the theme of eating your brain. And is that sort of like a chef thing? Like, do you sort of think about that, about people eating your brain?
I don't even think of it like that. No, that's
okay.
Wait, was that a theme of the album or of the song?
There's two references to eating brains. There's this one and there's one later where he talks about like pickling his brain with some chili oil, and he's actually talking. Yeah. So like in Bad Dreams Are Only Dreams, it feels to me like he had like you had just seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, because you basically described like using the skull as a chafing dish and or like Silence of the Lambs or something, that kind of thing. Is there something to
I
this?
can see that. To me, I'm seeing it a little differently when I'm writing it, to where it's like I'm brain exposed to the elements. Like I'm really thinking about like when you don't sleep, which is a thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
How you start to be like, man, my brain is not working properly. Like your brain is more vulnerable. It feels, I was trying to make it feel as though like if you lifted your skull off and just let your brain be in the world, that's what you're doing when you don't get enough sleep. That's where I was really coming. The bone china chafing dish was just a sequence of words and images that I loved.
So that's not your skull?
No, it is, but it's
okay.
Like after lifting off your skull, right, looking at it in your hands, and thinking of it as a bone china and chafing dish. Not that the brain is still in your head. It's just gold top that has come off. I didn't think about actually eating the brains in
so yeah, I guess I just read the eating part in. I was just hearing the term chafing dish. I don't know. This album makes me hungry.
yeah, no, hey. I mean, that was a food reference for sure, but
yeah,
I did not think of it that way, although that does not in any way validate that reading.
So the book Babylon by Bas will take you back to the 1970s, the golden days of reggae music, as well as the heyday.
One of the things I find most interesting is one line in Babylon by Bus, and it's because you're cheating with the English language. So you're omitting a pronoun, and then you're conjugating a verb, and then it can be any of the, it can be I, we, or they. So the line is caught 'em lacking on 9/11. So because you often take this sort of not pro-terrorist, but sort of like you use the imagery of terrorism quite often, I think, to question, you know, the state power of the United States, very understandable way. But like, if you said I caught him lacking, it would have been ridiculously.
Also to interrogate the mindset of, I mean, everybody involved in violence, no matter what, the same way state terrorism is interrogated, or 300 million US dollars hovering over a mud hut. Is the same thing as being like grenades attached to rockets and eager to tell you the names of their prophets.
Right.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite one.
So is it I, we, or they before caught him lacking? Or do you not want to say? Or is it just general?
I didn't think of that. I was just making a statement of fact.
Okay. So probably they?
Probably. I didn't think about it. So anything would be retrofitted. Anything,
okay.
Depending how you decided to look at the song. But I did not think about that at the time. I just thought that's what happened.
Wow, that's fun, because I thought like this is such a provocative line that leaving that out means it's so open to how we see it. So I was unintentionally left open. Oh, that's even better. Wow. So then with year zero, which we've already talked a little bit about.
Oh, we go. Year zero.
So Kenny, I'm just still obsessed with Wu-Tang and the connection with you guys. Is there any part of you that was trying to do a version of Incarcerated Scarfaces with this beat?
No.
Okay. Do you hear the similarities?
I'd have to go listen to hear what you're thinking of.
It's like really.
I know the song you're talking about, but
yeah,
that doesn't come to mind as something that.
There are worse songs to have to go listen to, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite. I think it's my favorite RZA beat. I mean, it's just the drum sample.
What? I mean, I love that song, but what are we?
Right, I don't know if I could say that's my favorite RZA beat either. There's a lot of
it's not even the illest beat on Cuban Links. But you said your favorite, which is totally acceptable.
Yes. Yeah.
It's dope. I mean, beat is crazy.
But it's so funny because when I listened to it for the first time, you know, I was so blown away by the beat, and I think it's my favorite verse on the album. And when I saw that Danny Brown was on it, I was a little bit annoyed because I'm like, well, Danny Brown's so hot right now because the JPEG Mafia thing, and there's like a certain kind of edgelord fan that he gets, and so like I can imagine people getting drawn to this song for Danny Brown, and so I was getting annoyed because I thought it was going to be a sort of a Danny Brown verse that was not as good as the one that we got. And then like somehow his verse is totally perfect and doesn't take away from the song at all, and like does everything that Danny Brown does well, and none of the stuff that ever annoys me, like kind of the over sexual stuff, which can just be it's not my thing. So yeah, I don't know how you did that, where you had like this amazing verse.
Let me tell you what happened, right?
Okay, what happened?
I met Danny Brown in person at Oblivion Access Fest in Austin, and it was me and Pierce from Soul Glow were sitting there, and Danny Brown came in, and Elucid, Chaz was there too. He said, "What's up?" But Chaz went somewhere. I don't remember where he went, but we were backstage. I think Fat Tony was there. Other people are there that I don't know. Peace to them. I just don't remember. I didn't know them at the time. And me, Danny Brown, and Pierce kind of had a conversation. Or I watched Pierce and Danny Brown have a conversation, which was a potentially life-altering experience. Those are two different people, but it was a funny interaction. And Danny Brown and I were talking too, and then he was just I went and performed, and when I came back in, he was like, we talked some more, and he was like, you should hit me up. I was like, I fuck with your music, man. Like Triple X, one of the greatest rap albums in the last 20 years, for sure. And I was like, well, I fuck with your music. We should do something. And he was going to do what he did. But then once I heard the track, I sent it to him. And Danny was like, all right, I got it. So I was like, cool. And then, you know, you're waiting and you never know. So you check back in with rappers while trying not to be an annoyance. Started to get a little skeptical. Kenny, did you get skeptical?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were waiting for like for 6 months. I mean, I wasn't skeptical, but I also like the verse you had done was so dope. Like I was kind of like, if you just like do another verse, the song is going to be amazing anyway. So whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, so I was just waiting it out because I felt like people a lot of times I can tell their energy if they're gonna do it or not, especially because I try to be like, if you can't do it or whatever, I give people an out. I try not to be like, you gotta do it. You know, it's like, yo, just let me know. And so somebody's like, nah, I'm doing it. So anyway, I'm in New York. He hit me and was like, I'm in New York. What's good? And I was like, oh, do you want to do that verse? And he was like, yeah, let me know where to go. So I called Steel Tip Dove, who really came through. He's hours when lots of people's aren't, times and short notice, and really coming through in different ways. Beats, you know, if you're like, hey, make a bridge that makes these two beats make sense, like that's a dude who I can like be like, all right, take care of this. So anyway, I was like, yo, I'm trying to get this Danny thing done. Can we come through there tonight? And he was like, yeah, I'll make it happen. So I just went over there. We were waiting. Danny he was late, but not like, probably like an hour. So rapper time, nothing crazy. So he came through with a few people, and then another car came through with some other people. So there were a bunch of people at the studio. And I was like, yo, I thought you probably, I didn't know if you're actually gonna come through. And he was like, no. And he really went off in a way that I really was like, wow, that's cool that dude respects me like that, because we're not moving in the same circles. I don't know if he hears my music or what. But he was like, yeah, man, you were trying to rush me. And I knew I needed to take my time because I'm not trying to do a song with Woods and my shit isn't right.
That's awesome.
Honestly, one of the bigger compliments that I've been paid. But he was like, yeah, no. Because he was like, you were trying to rush me, man. I had to get my shit right. Like, then, yo, he went in to record. He went into the booth with 2 phones on. Like, he had a verse, I guess, on each phone. I don't know what. I never seen somebody rap with 2 phones up. And the verse was actually a little longer than that. But that's where it made sense to kind of. Yeah.
No, I think in the end we left the whole thing in, actually.
Oh, that was the whole thing? Okay, all right.
Yeah,
cool.
because at one point I had toyed with cutting it down. I know there was definitely
to keep the whole thing, or as much of it as we could.
Yeah, at one point there's definitely was a version or two that we shared back and forth where I had pared it down a little bit, but I think pretty quickly we both got on the same page of like, let's not do that.
Yeah, wild session though. Your man came through with mad random people.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it. I mean, it's a really like unique song. I really think it is, and that I can think of. And I've never heard a rap song like that feels so live. Like when he's doing his verse and when he pauses for the laugh break, and everybody the first time they hear him make that that's like one of the great punchlines, you know, broke like the ice cream machine. He doesn't even say McDonald's, but you know what he's saying because he said nuggets. And like when he pauses for that laugh, everybody laughs the first time. And it's not even like you leave in laughter on the track. I don't know if there is actual laughter, but there's like some ambient sound. And it feels like Danny Brown showing up at some random studio with 30 people when Woods was not expecting him to show up, and him paying a big compliment and then dropping a verse that shows he has to be on his best. Like that whole story you just told.
Phones, man. The two phones.
Yeah, with the two phones.
Never forget. I don't even know how that works. Right? Was he going back and forth? I don't even know. Yeah.
And then the turn of it, because he's telling these jokes, and then he ends it with, "I'm not worried about the hate. I just wonder where the love's gone." And it's like all of a sudden it all ties in together with your verse, because they don't go perfectly together, because your verse is this, you know, wonderful anthropological misanthropic take on where did humanity go wrong, and then to end it with like, where's the love? Well, that's the short version of the question. You know, we've lost empathy and all that, and we have to start again, kids. So yeah, that is such a great story. That the song, the way it was created, is exactly how it sounds. And you, just like you were saying in the beginning, no, you can't recreate that. You can't tell someone, "Oh, let's make a Year Zero style song," because how could you get all of that in one?
The song itself, its sentiments are a swirl of chaotic energy to begin with. So for him to personify that in his verse, I thought was perfect.
And then Kenny, you liked my Instagram post, which is always a big moment for me whenever an artist likes anything that I do, where I tried to recreate the sound. Did you really use the sound of an input of a guitar, like when it starts to get plugged in? Is that the sound that I hear in the back of the chorus?
So not exactly, but so I have this instrument called an omnichord, which is actually like a very pretty sounding instrument for the most part, but mine's super bent, so it can make some like kind of grungy, weird noises. And I kind of told this story on a different interview recently. Basically, I had a friend over who had brought over this drum machine, and we were jamming and kind of doing this almost like Nine Inch Nails-y kind of jam. And I had the omnichord through some distortion pedals and a reverb, and was making these wailing noises. And when he left, I just made that beat very recently. Like I think I'd literally made it earlier that day, like the bare bones of it, like the drums and the sample and the bass hit. So I loaded it up and just started jamming with the omnichord hooked in through all those guitar distortion pedals and stuff. And just laid a lot of times, I very rarely like try and record a part. I'll just like jam for like a few passes over something and then chop it out like a sample. So all of those noises, it's not actually unplugging the guitar, but it's all noises of like my omnichord like breaking up and dying through these distortion pedals with the different like circuit bent features on it that kind of like make it crap out in different ways. So yes, it's kind of what you're saying, but not exactly.
Hot air balloon ride. I forgot your fear of heights. I don't mean to be.
I did have a question, Woods, about your style, like. So like, you know, Method Man, going back to Wu-Tang, you know, he's sort of like the king of just sort of throwing out references and not always having there be a meaning behind them, but he just says it so well and it's kind of unexpected that you just sort of roll with it. So like when you talk about, you know, Walking with the Panther, after saying going back to Cali, and so, you know, all the hip hop heads know you're referencing LL Cool J. Is that how far it goes, where it's LL Cool J walking with a panther and that works? Or is there also something behind saying walking with a panther? Like, is there usually or always a secondary reason for that kind of like follow-up thing? Or is it sometimes a punchline?
I would say it is completely song dependent. In that particular song, I just like the visuals of it. I'm not thinking of the Panthers. And then of course, the going back to Cali connection is key in making it sort of have an extra layer or relate, and also going to the next line because of the Deion Sanders, like, you know, picking something up and going back the other way.
You see, I overanalyzed that completely. And I looked at Deion Sanders' career and realized that he won a Super Bowl in Dallas and then
You also
went to
did that. That's another
California.
level. You're not wrong. That is another level. I
No,
definitely
awesome.
played on the West Coast and then went back. I mean, that's my era of football.
Right.
But yeah, it was definitely like playing into the chorus. It was like going back to Cali was part of it.
Is doing an agriculture major and getting an agriculture degree worth it? That's what we're going to be talking about today.
With agriculture, okay. So you know, because I'm a French professor, I'm obsessed with a lot of different ideas, and especially I'm obsessed with the nature of society. And it seems like a lot of what you write about is about sort of the way that the inequality of society is evidence that human beings were perhaps better, or at least better in certain ways, when they were not in a civilization that was dependent on money and the inequality that's there. So I'm constantly thinking
in this cabin.
Yes. Yes, and I'm thinking of Rousseau in particular, because I'm a French professor, and that's what I'm thinking of. Are you thinking? So you are that is sort of the basic premise, right? I'm not too far off on that.
Hold on the album or
no on agriculture.
No.
Okay.
On agriculture, the premise is this. Sometimes it's two different things that happen when you're on the road. One of them is sometimes you're driving in the middle of nowhere, you stop at a gas station somewhere or a diner, and I think, what if I just stopped here? You know, somewhere between Albuquerque and Tucson, and you're just like, what if I just stayed here? Especially because I've spent such a long time in New York City, other different lifestyle choices and occupations and things where our lives were at one point more in synergy and now they're more different. Although
because that's I mean, that totally makes sense. And it's not, even though my reading goes, you know, way off course from that, it does tie together in some ways. Because I mean, the part of the reason why I came up, I sort of saw it as a companion piece to Year Zero, and I now see that was totally off. And what you're describing is, again, more interesting than my own interpretation. But I was fascinated by, you know, from Hiding Places, you know, the last line in Hiding Places on the song Bedtime is the dog ran off, didn't come back yet. And then the last line on Agriculture is I opened up I forget exactly, I opened up the screen door and let the dog out, right? It's something like that. So I interpreted the dog sort of representing people not being constrained by the sort of inequality of society and, you know, like running off and running away from society in bedtime. And then I see you letting the dog out sort of spiritually in your house, which sort of represents confining something that shouldn't be confined and shouldn't have whatever exchange value put on them. So that was the way that I saw it. But now it makes a lot more sense that the dog maybe that's being let out is sort of an imagination of an actual dog and not a metaphor.
Yeah, man, I wrote that when I went to work on. We were working on the video for Puerto Rico with Joseph. Yeah, I wrote that there. The idea had already developed, and I had ideas for it jotted down, but I put it together there, kind of out there. With two people, one person, Joseph used to live in New York, that's where I know him from, and now he lives out there and has a sort of they live on like a little property with a farmhouse, and you know, there was a dog there and a screen door, and you know, but I mean, I guess you could say that it's a companion piece to Year Zero, and I've never thought about it in this way. You could say on like a personal level,
right?
The idea of on a personal level being like, let's just start again,
right? Yeah,
that's whatever things tied it down to people that we thought that we were, the situations, good or bad, that we've gotten into, like maybe we can leave that behind and be somebody else and have a different destiny, a different life.
Well, I think we've got just one more song to go. I think we.
Listen down there, listen. Nothing that man ever made can keep Houdini a prisoner. Now watch me.
got to all of them. Kenny, are you aware of the first song that sampled the song that you sampled on Houdini?
Are you, are you talking about the first song that I sampled using that same sample, or
No, so according to whosampled.com, the first
Don't say the name of the song.
I'm not going
Yeah,
to.
we
No,
didn't
no, I'm not.
talk
That's
about
I'm not going to.
I'm
Anyways,
not aware of who you're referring to who sampled it. I have actually sampled that song twice before.
okay.
myself.
I heard it. I believe the first place it's
On
ever been
well-known
heard
songs.
is a Beyonce song. So I didn't know if that was on purpose or not. If there's some kind of
I was
secret
totally
Beyonce
not
thing
aware of
happening
that.
here. Okay.
So that's an old beat. That beat was from the era of So the Flies Don't Come, and that same record is sampled in a very different way, but it's also sampled on one of the biggest songs on So the Flies Don't Come.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. No sample snitching here.
It's definitely one of my favorite records.
Yeah.
I've owned that record for a very long time, and yes, I think I've sampled it maybe 4 times, but 2 times that are very well known songs.
Right.
But yeah, let's not talk too much about that one.
Yes.
I've always wondered if that one was going to be a problem from the So the Flies Don't Come sample. So
Okay. Well, no one said anything about anything. And then is it intentional to have a song called Houdini and have a song Houthi? Is there any kind of, are you playing around with the similar vowel sounds, and is that just a coincidence?
Oh, I mean, Houthi.
I know it's totally different meanings, totally different songs.
Yeah. And who knew when I wrote it, I didn't know that it had just, all of that had really just started cooking.
Yeah.
I feel like Houdini wasn't even the original title of that song. Wasn't it called something else at first, I think?
Remember, because that was during the period when we were flying downhill, man.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
I feel like I'd have to look on my hard drive, but I'm pretty sure I had it labeled as something else for a while, and then you said Houdini towards the towards the end.
I could believe that.
Okay, so that's the total coincidence. In that case, let's end with one where I'm pretty confident I'll at least get a win on this one. When you're the CD that you're listening to in Amsterdam, the Jay-Z CD, is 100% Reasonable Doubt, correct?
No.
But you say 22 twos. You say 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 in the verse. You're telling us it's Reasonable Doubt without it being Reasonable Doubt. Why are you fooling me like this, Woods?
The reference is a Reasonable Doubt reference.
Yes.
100%. And it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody where they were asking about the song. I'm like, oh no, the song is being in Amsterdam now and remembering when I used to be there. It's like now you're there, you have a safe in your hotel.
Right.
I remember when it used to be like I'm in a hostel and like I've got like all my money in my socks.
Yeah.
Just like running around Amsterdam when I was like a kid. At that point, we would have to be talking about, I would probably say volume 3. I went there beginning of 2001, before 9/11, and then I go there in the spring of 2002 after 9/11.
Wait, you were there in 2001 and 2000? Because the funny thing is, I was there in that same time period in 2002. That's like
I was literally just hustling, and then I was like, I'm going to Amsterdam with friends, and
right. I had backpacked in Europe for a minute with a friend of mine, and then ended up flying my girlfriend at the time out. It was like one of the biggest flexes I'd ever done at that time in my life, to meet me in Amsterdam. And then we got like, I mean, this is way before Airbnb, but we had some like Airbnb-ish spot for like a couple of days in Amsterdam, and it would have been like spring or summer of 2002.
Yeah, I was definitely there.
Awesome. I don't know. I'm not very good at like being a radio guy. I'm supposed to ask you if you want to promote anything.
As far as things to promote, not particularly, except I do have that book A is for Anarchist out with M. Musgrove that I think is pretty cool. And Steel Tip Dub and Fatboy Sharif have an album coming out called Decay in a couple months or maybe less. We got a new Fielded record coming, new Blockhead record coming, and We don't have a date on it yet, but there'll be a Cavalier record this fall. Super excited about that.
All right.
And I'll just say right before I got on this phone call, I just listened to and approved the masters for an album I have with this artist, Pink Navel, who's on Ruby Yacht. That should hopefully be coming out later this summer. Sounds excellent. Thank you very much, Daddy Kev, on the master on that. And yeah, and I have an album with the singer Benjamin Booker, who sang the hook on Baby Steps. That is to be determined when it's coming out, but it is also a very, very, very intriguing album. And I have an album with Abstract Rude that will hopefully come out by the year's end as well. So,
yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'll look forward to your new music.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate you making the effort.
Yeah,
and thank you to all the people that listen so closely. Like, I'm still getting used to the idea of people scrutinizing the way they do everything we do. And yeah, thank you guys for listening, everyone.
Yeah.
All right, peace.
All right, peace. Good night. All right, first of all, props to my normal Patreons. I mean, they're all my normal Patreons now, but you know, these are the Patreons before I did the exclusive early access to the unedited version of this. Got Bo coming into the room. And now I'm going to read off the names of everybody who signed up for Patreon after I released that. Bo, do you want to say their names? No, he's going to leave. Why does Bo have a cone? The dog cannot stop licking himself. It's sad but true. Okay, first of all, at the higher tiers, Alex Berry and Sizz the World. Thank you for supporting the channel. Now I'm going to go through the rest. We got Dougie Smooth, Pearl Newsom, Alexandre David Labbé, Yama, Joseph Luis Alcala, Richard Hoffman, Arnie, Michael Twillman, Earman Eichel, Ethan Gardner, Ethan Gardier, I don't know how to say it, Joseph Tikram, Henri, Edible Butler, Nicolas Essarte, Max, that was an easy one, Forrest, Drink More Water, it's true, you should drink more water, Keontae Seeley, Mario, Adil Nasheed, Joseph or Yosef Dalto, Fias Kane or Kane, Abu Slang, Max Paulino, Bradley Hooks, Ashwin Ramesh, this is crazy, y'all, Tyler, Nick Denhalter, Jonas Wilkie or Jonas Wilkie, I don't know, Ty the Guy, Rio C, Hater Slayer 420. It's not a 420 friendly channel. But hey, I just did a 2.5 hour interview, or however long this is, interview with Billy Woods, so maybe I am a 420 friendly channel. People can change, you know? You think this is slicked back? Brian Henderson, Groucho Merks. Hello, I must be going. Mitchell Lutz, Mike, just Mike. Joshua Jamelkowski, Gregory, Miguel, James Schultz, Nick Liederman, Nayid. Okay, listen. This sounds like a Balkan name, so I should be able to get this. Nejc Ujcic, Nejcujcic, Julian or Julian Haraz, Ioin. Isn't that one of the dwarfs from Hobbit? Vaseline Kostov. You wrote that in Cyrillic, but I figured it out because I'm learning Serbo-Croatian. Jake Brown, Danny, Stanley Morris, Regan. Don't know if that's like after the president or after the character from The Exorcist. Barun Chanda, Joseph Burcham, Zalas Wolfgang, Liam O'Brien, Romanian Noodle, Rex, Fixa, Fives, Echo, just Rex, Cody, Mr. Alfie Linville Sibley. A couple names in there that I recognize from my life. It's weird. Liam Benema, Micah, Zeph Marcus, and last but not least, Noah Carter. So that's like 3 minutes of me reading names. So if that was you, thank you for supporting my work with Woods. I hope you're not bitter about the fact that I released the unedited version publicly. I said I may. And listen, you supported me so much. the outpouring that I got, the amount of support I got from doing that, really meant a lot to me. So at the very least, you have my sincere appreciation. You know, I don't do sponsorships, so you're my sponsor. You know, I don't think you should do VPNs. That seems like a waste of money. Definitely don't go Manscaped. If you're gonna buy like some kind of like razor, just get a wall peanut. Order it on Amazon. Very inexpensive. Excellent. It's like German designed. Very good. Plug into the wall. You don't ever need to do Manscaped. All that Scottish land. That's all a joke. Display, those posters are ugly. Just spend money on like real art, and you don't have to like buy art, you know, but just go ahead and just go to a museum and just get a poster from a museum, you know, but just get something real, you know. Don't just get something that's just cranked out. So, anyways, what are the other things people sponsor all the time? Oh, HelloFresh and HelloBox and all that stuff. That stuff's cool. That's all right. HelloFresh, that stuff's okay. The pre-made meal stuff, that's kind of a crock. It's just microwave meals by a different name. What else do people... all those mobile games? No. I mean, I play Pokemon Go and Mario Kart Tour, but I'm not sponsored by them, nor would I be. Read a book. That sounds arrogant, but that's what I mean. What other non-sponsorships are my Patreons helping me to avoid? Oh yeah, there's all like if you use this, then we'll plant a tree. Don't believe any of that. No one's planting trees for you ever. Don't listen to some. I love my leftist YouTubers, but when they're shilling for these companies that are like, we promise we are planting trees. No, they're not. There's no effing way they're planting trees. They don't care. Don't be a sap. All companies are the same. They're just trying to make money. It doesn't matter how cool the person is who's talking to you about it. There you go. And I don't think you need thin wallets either. Who needs a wallet, to be honest? So I think that's everything. I think that's all the sponsorships that I don't have. Thanks to people like Zef Marcus and Forrest and Veselin Kostov and Nait Udic. All right. Till next time, there's the camera.